So I was born in Mossman, and then my father was very keen for me to become a real estate valuer. Actually, he was running quite a successful valuing business in the city, and he said, "Look, son, this is the area for you to get into." And so I started off with working with my father, and found it very interesting because we used to tour around and measure up homes and buildings, and well, I did all the measuring actually. That was one of my jobs. So I became very interested in architecture, and then I decided to enrol in Sydney University Extension course in valuation of real estate, and became a qualified real estate valuer. But then I realised that my true love was really architecture. Touring around with my father, looking at buildings, I just felt that real estate valuing, although I was fully qualified, wasn't my first love. So I decided to enrol at Sydney University in the architecture course, and my father understood the situation, and he did support me. He was a bit disappointed, of course. I enrolled in Sydney University, but in those days there was no such thing as a HECS scheme or free education and at the university. So my parents struggled to keep me there, so I decided that rather than stay at Sydney University, I'd transfer to Sydney Tech College and do a part-time architecture course over 6 years, working in architects' offices during the day. So I used to sketch and draw at home, and I would draw up sort of plans of a Tudor house or a modern house, and I just enjoyed drawing.
Did your father have the equipment around, rulers?
No. He didn't have any drawing equipment. I just bought that for myself.
And what were your sources of inspiration when you were drawing a Tudor house? Did you have textbooks on architecture in the library or at school?
Well, we used to, when we were going around valuing homes, a lot of the homes were in the Southern Highlands and in the Tudor style, and I sort of I found that quite an interesting style. Not that I ever adopted it myself, but so I used to draw up Tudor houses with the pattern walls, and that sort of thing, and some modern homes too. Yeah. Just as an amusement for myself, really. I love the modern architecture, the open spaces and the clean lines. I never liked cluttered architecture. I developed a love of concrete early in my career, because concrete's a wonderful material to work with. It's a plastic material, and it's got great strength, and you can achieve some wonderful dramatic effects with concrete. And I particularly loved the work of Frank Lloyd Wright when we were doing architecture at the Sydney Tech College. Most of us, or all of us, I would say, admired Frank Lloyd Wright's work, his dramatic use of concrete and his mastery of concrete, and the contrast between the vertical elements and the horizontal elements. But one particular house that we all loved was Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Waters near Pittsburgh, which was designed in about 1935, and even today it's a wonderful example of modernism. So I developed that love of modernism very early, and particularly loved the work of Le Corbusier, the French-Swiss architect, who was also a great advocate of concrete and freestanding spaces and uninterrupted glazed walls. During the architecture course, we became very aware of the work of Le Corbusier with his use of concrete and glazed walls. And the Bauhaus architecture influenced all the students because it was uncluttered architecture. It was clean, simple architecture, unadorned architecture. And also, towards the end of our course, we became very aware of Harry Seidler, because at that stage, Harry Seidler was a young upcoming architect in the Sydney area, and he was having some monumental battles with local councils, and we were following Harry Seidler's trials and tribulations with the councils with great interest. We were taught that the basic rule in architecture is form follows function, and that means that the function of the building determines the form, so you don't pretend to be anything else but the function of the building. So form follows function was the philosophy of Harry Seidler, and Harry did some wonderful work. He did a house in Canberra around about 1954. It was the Bowden House, and it was only a simple house, 2 bedrooms and a study and a garage underneath, but it was simple and uncluttered. And we admired that house very much. And also he did a house for his parents, which is the Rose Seidler House, and he struck a lot of trouble with the council over that initially. Of course, we were aghast, I think, as students to see how dominant some of the councils were in trying to determine what was good architecture or not. An architect is a trained person, and yet some of these councils were saying, look, you know, we don't like that sort of work and you'll have to change that design. And so I think Harry Seidler was instrumental really in bringing a lot of councils into line. And at Sydney University, the Professor of Architecture was Leslie Wilkinson, who was English born and trained. And he was the Professor of Architecture for 30 years, from about 1918 to about 1948. And Leslie Wilkinson was a fine architect, but he just absolutely disdained modernism. His work was characterised by the Mediterranean style, I suppose. It's based on the architecture of Spain, Italy and France, the coastal regions. And the architecture was typically stuccoed, painted walls, Georgian windows with shutters, pergolas, Doric columns, what I would describe as pretty architecture. That, I think, influenced a lot of the architects coming out of Sydney University. But fortunately, at the Sydney Tech College, we had a very fine professor of architecture, Frederick Townborough, who was an Englishman. And he was really an advocate of modernism and the Bauhaus movement in architecture, the uncluttered architecture. And I think we came out of that course with a love of modernism, really. The whole function of my design work was to bring the indoors outwards. In other words, design the house so it could open up to the outdoors, so the occupants could enjoy the outdoors. Large terrace areas to enjoy the climate, our wonderful climate here in Sydney. Ample provision for ventilation, natural ventilation breezes. Large windows, large sliding glass doors, so that the house could be opened up to enjoy the climate. The Bauhaus movement of architecture, or the modernism movement of architecture, advocates the use of modern materials. And so with the use of modern materials, you can achieve so much in architecture design. When I talk about modern materials, I'm talking about reinforced concrete, RSJs, rolled steel beams, rolled steel joists, RSJs, which allow the building to be designed with large openings, large areas opening onto terraces. So the difference is that with modern materials you can achieve a lot more than the Mediterranean style ever achieved. It was in the time when I was just before I joined the practice of George Pollard, Malcolm Nora. I was asked to design this house in North Sydney, and the client was John Churcher and his wife Joan, and they asked me to design this house on a block in Boggata Avenue at Neutral Bay, which was a very steep site, a difficult site. They did say to me that they enjoyed modern architecture, and they knew that I embraced modernism, and they gave me a free hand, basically, which was excellent. A lot of clients tend to lay down a very strict brief sometimes to the architect, and that sometimes it's very restrictive on the architect if the brief is too specific. It's better really for an architect to be given an open hand and an open brief. And they gave me an open brief. They said they wanted a modern home, 3 bedrooms, workshop, study, an area for the children to play in. They loved the outdoors. They would like a large outdoor area for the children. They would like plenty of open space. And so I came up with this plan, which they were very happy with. And yes, the house was built on the basis that lots of reinforced concrete, cantilevered concrete hood over the terrace area to keep out the summer sun and the western sun. A very large deck, large sliding glass doors, an open plan, free circulation, and provision for opening up the living room onto the terrace. Yes, the terrace featured 4 large sliding plate glass doors opening through to the living room and the dining area, and a large open fireplace. I think they were quite delighted, actually, if I can say that.